and it's going to go really, really quickly. Now, before we start, I'm just going to say, remind you of something relative to the exam. So compared to last year, it's no longer the case that you'll have free choice. So you'll have 8 questions and you have to write 3 essays. But it's no longer true that you can totally specialise in one of the parts, say TB1 stuff, or international trade, which is what we're going to cover in TB2. So you will still have the chance to weigh towards one of them, but you will have to show some knowledge of both parts. So it's going to be the exam is going to be very similar to that of international finance. So we've changed it to make it basically comparable. Answer 3 questions, at least one from part A and one from part B. Yeah. So the reason I'm starting with this is because, of course, many of you are already thinking about revision plans and so on, and please bear in mind that it's not a question of if you slacked, say, during the first term. Not that you did, but suppose you had, and you're kind of saying, okay, 2015, I'm now going to start thinking seriously about my exams. I'm going to focus on international trade, and I'll still be able to do really well because I have the choice to answer 3 questions on trade. That used to be the case. It's no longer the case. So you will be able to do, say, 2 questions on trade, but you will still have to show some knowledge of TB1 material. Yeah, is that all right? But having said this, it shouldn't be too stressful at all because there is plenty of choice. Okay, so this is really a standard course in international economics, and so we spent half of the year looking at what's effectively open economy, macroeconomics, and for many of you that are going into finance, that's the more relevant stuff. It really is, you know, being able to understand what changes exchange rates, what explains countries' fluctuations and so on is definitely the more important aspect of international economics. But this second bit is also relevant, but it's a classic course in international trade. So trade has been taking place for thousands and thousands of years. But it has evolved over time, and we economists have developed, by looking at the data, theories that explain this change. And so we spend a lot of time looking at theories of international trade, and then we also look at policy issues. So I can see that lots of you arrived later. Is it because there was a lecture? Macro theory and policy. Okay. Well, I mean, if everyone is happy with this, shall we then decide to start at 5 past all the time? Or does that make problems for those that have something at 11 o'clock? No, that's one person. That's not democracy. And where's that? That's all right, because I'm also teaching at 11, but it's just round the corner, really. So if I start at past 5, and then I finish really 5 minutes to 11, it should be all right. Yeah, is that okay? Right, so for all of you that arrived late, the only relevant thing I said before, after having wished you a good Christmas, was that, and good exams, was that your exam will have compulsory, part A and part B questions. You will need to answer at least 1 question from each part. So you can't specialise just in this TB2 material. Okay, so the first part had 3 major topics, and so why is this? This is right. So the first part had 3 major topics. This part has 4 major topics, so you will expect to get 1 question per topic. And so these slides here are just an introduction to the topic international trade, and it makes sense for all of you to read this introductory material, irrespective of whatever you're going to specialise on when it comes to exams. So this is not the right slide. So this is the first slide, and it's just showing you that the world will become ever more globalised when it comes to international trade. And what's interesting about this, so as you can see, there is this first wave of globalisation. But what you can see, of course, is that this ratio of exports to world GDP has kept on rising. And of course, GDP has also kept on rising throughout the century, the 20th century, and now the beginning of the 21st century. World GDP. So this means that because the ratio has kept on rising and has increased very, very dramatically from 10% to now something like 35%, it means that trade has increased much faster than GDP. Yeah? So we have definitely become more interconnected. And this slide here shows you the imports and exports as a fraction of GDP for various countries. So Great Britain, the United Kingdom is here, and as you can see, it's a pretty open economy, but that's nothing compared to some economies out here. Now, if you look at these economies, I mean, no offence to anyone from Ireland and Belgium, but they're not the most populous countries in the world, are they? And it's quite normal for a small economy to actually be more open, in the sense that exports as a fraction of GDP and imports will also be greater. And basically it has to do with specialisation. The smaller the economy, the more you will have to focus on specialising in a few products and then hope to sell a lot of those products in exchange for many other things you cannot produce at low cost. Yeah? And so this is what explains why so many of these very open economies with very high export and import ratios as a fraction of GDP tend to have very small populations. So the only country here in these top, in these 8 here that has more than 10 million people is the Netherlands. So the Netherlands is definitely a very, very open economy, even relative to its population size. Now, this diagram here is interesting because it shows you that, not too surprisingly, the US trades a lot with other big economies, including China and Japan. But it trades even more with Canada. And Canada, I mean, it's a very developed economy, but it's an economy with about 30 million people. So you would wonder, why is it that the US trades so much with this fairly small economy? And the basic answer is because they're big neighbours. And the same thing goes for Mexico. Mexico is a much smaller economy than China, but in terms of trade with the US, it has similar amounts. And it has to do with, again, with the fact that they are neighbours. So geographical proximity matters when it comes to trade flows. And these next 2 slides just expand on that. So what we have here on the horizontal axis is the percentage of EU GDP that a country represents. So, for example, France represents about 17% of the EU GDP. Germany, a bit more than 20%. Spain, a bit less than 10%. And this is the percentage on the vertical axis. You have the percent of US trade with the EU, with each of those countries. if the trade with one of these countries were exactly proportionate to their size relative to the economic area, that the points should be on an exact line. But as you can see, they're not, but it's actually fairly close. The differences here are not massive. Now, take this sort of diagram and add a few more countries. Have those two big neighbors of the United States, Mexico on the south and Canada to the north. And you can see that, so this bit here is just representing what we had in the previous slide. And now we have it to other countries. And as you can see, Mexico and Canada trade a lot more with the US than would be expected given the size of their economies. And this has to be with the geographical proximity. Now, these slides, the next two slides are about the UK. And I want to emphasize just a couple of things. First, how indeed, despite the existence of about 200 countries in the world, it always depends on how you measure them and so on. Whether you ignore countries with less than 1 million people, you have most trade in the most trade in the UK is actually taking place with a select group of countries. So these top 15 countries represent 70% of UK exports, and with imports it's going to be the same thing. And not too surprisingly, you do get the US and China, so the two biggest economies in the world, but you also get many European countries. So this, of course, is just reiterating this, the importance of Europe as a whole as a trading partner. If you sum the trade that takes place with all of these European economies, it far outweighs everything else. So that's why the European area matters so much for the British economy. Now, if you look at, so this is exports. If you now look at imports, what's interesting is that the same countries that appeared in the export markets are also appearing in the import markets. And this is interesting, though, because this seems to suggest that it's really not one-way traffic. If there is most of the time going to be exports and imports that will have a fairly similar size between two countries. Of course, you can have with some countries very large trade surpluses or trade deficits, but on average, you're going to have a two-way traffic. So yes, the UK exports a lot of stuff to Germany. It also imports a lot of stuff from Germany. It's, so this is all the machinery, all the cars and so on that are made in Germany, and the British economy buys every single year. And yet again, as you can see, 70% of trade is accounted by these 15 countries, even though there are so many more countries out there. Now, the next two slides are useful to think about what has happened in terms of trade. There used to be a time, we're going to start with that, called trade based on comparative advantage. There used to be a time where the sort of stuff that you exported was totally different from the stuff that you imported from a country. So, for example, it could well be that Australia and Canada, that are two gigantic countries with very small populations, had a natural advantage in anything that's produced in the primary sector, including agricultural products. And so, not too surprisingly, both countries are some of the biggest